It another couple of minutes to allow people to join us. We'll get started in just a few minutes. To everyone's time and have as much time as possible with you all this evening. I'd like to get started, and I apologize for the chimes in the background. So hello everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority Community Project Update Meeting. We're really glad that you're here. My name is Margaret Bruce. I'm the Executive Director of the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority. Today's presentation will provide a general overview of the REACH 2 or upstream project's components. That's the work that happens between Highway 101 and the Pope Chaucer Bridge. We will not be addressing any detailed information about impacts to trees in this presentation. We know that's important to a lot of people, and so we will focus on trees during our next project update meeting on March 2nd. Now, I'd like to cover some housekeeping items. This presentation, including the question and answer portion, is being recorded. We will post the recording on our website along with written answers to questions. Because we have a large group today, to ensure that we have the best possible sound quality, all attendees have been muted. However, we want to hear from everyone, and we welcome your questions and comments. To let us know what you're thinking, please use the Q&A function. Take a moment now to find where that is on your screen. If you click on it, it opens a dialog box, and you can type in your question. At the end of our presentation, we will read the questions and comments that have been posted. Please just add them as the presentation progresses if something comes to mind. Don't necessarily need to wait until the end. We will get to as many of your questions as we can while aiming to wrap up our event in about an hour. We know that we're standing between you and dinner. We may paraphrase and combine similar questions so that we get to as many as we possibly can. For anyone calling in by phone, we do not have a good way to identify your interest in asking a question. So if there is anyone calling in who has a question, please email it to me at mbruce@sfcjpa.org after this evening's meeting. We'll answer your question via email. We are anticipating that our board chair, Ruben Avrica, will be joining us a little bit after this slide presentation concludes, and he may have some additional remarks right after the slideshow. Before I launch into the slides, though, I do want to say joining me are my Creek Authority colleagues, Miko Harris-Parker, Tess Byler, and Kevin Murray. Kevin is the Creek Authority's Senior Project Manager for the REACH 2 project. With us are also Russ Nygaard of NV5 Engineering, Alec Nicholas and Peter Park from Valley Water are partners in this project, and these folks can help answer any technical or engineering questions. At the end, Kevin and Tess will be reading your questions and comments, and we'll all pitch in to answer your questions. Just as a reminder, please type your questions into the Q&A function, and we will get to them at the end of our presentation. And with that, let us proceed. So where are we? The San Francisco Creek is the watershed. So if you look at this, this image, the hourglass shape watershed, excuse me while I find my place. The lower part of this hourglass shape is the source of the majority of the water in the San Francisco Creek. Rain falls on the eastern slopes of the Santa Cruz Mountains, filling the streams that join just east of where Highway 280 crosses the creek. From this point, the creek encounters a comparatively flat valley floor and over millennia has deposited silts, gravel, and rocks, eroded from the mountains, and has created this large alluvial fan. Over time, the creek has cut a deep channel and built up high banks and this broad alluvial fan. This means that when the creek overtops its banks, the water flows out and down away from the creek channel and across this alluvial fan. Centuries ago, this would have been harmless, but now our urban landscape covers this alluvial fan in the floodplain, And even properties that are far away from the creek are vulnerable to flooding. Urban development in the creek's floodplain means that when the creek does flood, there's no natural place for the water to flow across, and there's limited flexibility in where and how we create flood protection solutions. The creek is also considered a flashy stream, meaning that the water level in the creek rises quickly when we have storms and then goes back down quickly. Like many streams in our area and elsewhere in California, water flows after winter storms, but the streams dry up in the summertime. And here it's dry except for the larger tributaries in the upper part of the watershed where water flows all year round. There has been flooding on the San Francisco Creek, and some people who may be participating may even have personal direct experience of that or memories of it from years ago. The highest flood on record is the 1998 flooding event that's here at the very top row. The JPA's Reach 2 project is intended to protect the communities of Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and East Palo Alto from an equivalent event, which is considered a once in a 70-year flood. The 7,200 cubic feet per second was measured at the USGS gauge at Stanford. The flow at Pope Chaucer Bridge was estimated to have been about 7,500 CFS. Most recently, the high flows of February 2017 were the sixth highest on record. And while we might be in a drought now, future climate scenarios indicate greater variability with the possibility of more extreme events. So we might see drier dry times and wetter wet times. This slide shows an aerial view of the flood zones, the San Francisco flood zones. With the completion of the Reach 1 downstream project, the red areas that you see in Palo Alto, in East Palo Alto, close to the bay, have been removed from the risk of creek flooding. But some of this area is still vulnerable to storm and tidal flooding and sea level rise from the bay. The areas in blue are still vulnerable to creek flooding from areas that break out along the creek between Pope Chaucer Bridge and Highway 101. And you can see how far that flooding can spread away from the creek banks. These images are of high water and flooding events along the San Francisco Creek. There are many properties vulnerable to flooding. In Menlo Park, there are about 800 parcels. In Palo Alto, about 2,100 parcels. In East Palo Alto, 2,900 parcels, particularly those west of Highway 101. The parcels located east of 101 are now protected by the completed Reach 1 downstream project. Today, properties with mortgages located in the FEMA floodplain must pay flood insurance, which can cost thousands of dollars a year. And according to recent reports, and some of you might have heard a news report just a day or so ago, that the FEMA flood insurance program may be raising the cost of flood insurance significantly in the coming years. So we are keen to address that cost impact to our community members. This image puts the Reach 2 project in a geographic context and helps to describe the Creek Authority's long-term holistic vision for flood protection. Starting at the bay, over here in the upper right-hand corner, and working our way up the watershed, we opened up the mouth of the creek, shown here in yellow. That's the Reach 1 project. Like changing the shape of that from the neck of a wine bottle to a mason jar, we widened the creek in this area, allowing for the water to move and flow freely from this point, from the Highway 101 area, flow smoothly to the bay. We are now focused on this middle portion, the area you see in pink, which we call the Reach 2 section, where we will be reducing constrictions in the creek channel and at the bridges to reduce the risk of overtopping of the banks in high flow events. These improvements will help achieve flood protection up to that 70-year flow, or the 1 in 70-year flood, equivalent to that 1998 experience, which is the flood of record. Moving further upstream, here in the bottom left-hand corner, we're beginning to investigate the feasibility of off-stream detention in the upper watershed to complement the work that we've finished in Reach 1 and will be doing in Reach 2. The areas in light green show where we may be able to construct temporary holding basins for water that's diverted from the creek channel during high flows. The evaluation of that is just beginning, and we're not sure yet if this idea will be feasible. The goal of this work is to implement, again, a holistic multi-part strategy that taken together will reduce the risk of flooding to most parcels, and hopefully all parcels in the San Francisco Creek FEMA floodplain area, and reduce their high cost of flood insurance. Our public process. So many of you have probably been around long enough to know that the JPA went through a CEQA process, but some of you may be new to the JPA and new to the awareness of this flood mitigation project that we are undertaking. So this is just to quickly acquaint you with the San Francisco Creek Joint Power Authority's projects are subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. This Reach 2 project went through an environmental impact report. There were public scoping meetings that were held in Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park. And there was an extensive additional stakeholder engagement process. So if you are new to the area, or if you're unfamiliar with the project, we're very glad that you're joining us now. Please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on my team for more details about the creek, its history, our project plans, or any other details. So the Reach 2 upstream project focuses on the area here circled in yellow between West Bayshore Road and the Pope Chaucer Bridge. There is one element that is very important to this project, but it is not part of our particular work. Replacing the Newell Bridge is a key piece of the overall flood risk mitigation plan, but this bridge should be replaced before the Pope Chaucer Bridge is replaced to avoid transferring flooding risk to other places along the creek. But the Newell Bridge design and implementation is being led by the City of Palo Alto. And so for information about the City of Palo Alto's work on the Newell Bridge, please visit their project website at the link shown here. Or it's easy to reach just by typing in Palo Alto Newell Bridge project, and this will pop right up. Based on current schedules, the Newell Bridge replacement will be constructed in 2023. Channel widening work that we'll talk about next can begin at the same time in 2023. The Newell Bridge and channel widening should be completed before the Pope Chaucer Bridge is replaced, and we'll continue talking about that. So starting downstream, the most downstream part is channel widening site number 5. This is where the creek is crossed by West Bayshore Road and Highway 101. As part of the Reach 1 downstream project, Caltrans installed a 4th channel or bore underneath the road. You can see a little bit of the hole here in this upper picture. This is a temporary cover. So the site widening work will open up this temporarily blocked 4th bore and widen this narrow part of the channel to match the capacity and take advantage of the work done in the downstream Reach 1 project that's just on the other side of the road over here. This channel widening location will utilize sheet pile walls, the same structures as were used on the other side of the highway to stabilize in the widened creek channel. Sites 1, 3, and 4. Because the Palo Alto side of the creek, that's all of this area, sort of at the bottom half of your picture here, has the most opportunity for increasing the channel capacity. And it is also the location of where there is the most Sac Creek concrete bank hardening. Our initial project design and approach has been to work on this side of the creek, on the Palo Alto side of the creek that has already been impacted by that hardscaping, leaving the other side as natural as possible. However, it's not the only possible approach. We continue to explore a range of channel widening options to optimize ways to minimize construction costs and impacts to the creek and impacts to project neighbors, to plan for constructability, and to address the requirements of regulatory agencies. These additional options may include top of bank treatments on the East Palo Alto side of the creek, or a combination of smaller actions on both sides of the creek. Right now, we are analyzing how high water flows will behave in these various configuration options to see what combination of options that we have for each of these three widening sites, Site 1, Site 3, Site 4. Treatments for these sites might include, and this is an illustration of what they might include. Examples are sheet pile walls or soil nail walls, or rock-filled wire mesh. We're still evaluating the types of channel and bank treatments that will work best in each location, considering all of the factors that I mentioned earlier. Site 2 is an interesting opportunity. At this location, the creek in the creek, there's this large concrete terrace. It might have been built in the 1930s or 1940s, and it encroaches and protrudes out into the stream channel. By removing this structure, we will be able to recreate a more natural stream bank, restoring natural flow to this portion of the creek and planting native trees and plants to restore a more native habitat area. This is a rendering of what the restored creek bank at Widening Site 2 may look like about 2 years or so after the bank has been restored with native trees and plants. At University Avenue, the creek banks are different heights, allowing the creek to break out at this point. The parapet of the bridge in this location will be extended, replacing the existing temporary wooden structure. And this is a map. This plan map puts the location of the Pope Chaucer Bridge into context. So now we'll move on to our conversation. The next piece is the Pope Chaucer Bridge. Again, the creek widening portions of our work can happen at the same time as the Newell Creek Bridge, or excuse me, the Newell Bridge construction and replacement. But the bridge here at Pope Chaucer needs to be done the successive year. There's no good way to do 2 bridge closures or 2 bridge reconstructions at the same time. This one has to come after. Sorry. So the constricted capacity of the Pope Chaucer Bridge creates a bathtub effect upstream, which can lead the creek to overtop its banks during high water events. The present bridge is a really thick, long concrete culvert with a flat concrete bottom. The new bridge design, so that Pope Chaucer Bridge is at the top, that's the current configuration. And the proposed new configuration is at the bottom picture. The new bridge design accomplishes multiple objectives. It removes the need for any adjacent flood walls by being high enough above the bank tops to let water pass underneath. It expands channel capacity by having a small in-channel footprint. It restores the natural channel water flow capacity. It restores the natural channel bottom, improving habitat. It provides railings for pedestrian and bicyclist safety. It does not include any flood walls on adjacent creek banks, nor retaining walls adjacent to the intersections on either side. It's still low enough. It has still a low enough arch that we don't need to change the elevations of the adjoining roads or intersections on either side of the bridge. And this is an aerial view of the bridge and adjoining intersections. So you can see they have, there's no change, there's no huge rise in the bridge, and the intersections remain at the same elevations they're at now. This plan view shows also here in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that the bridge does have a slight arch. It's not perfectly flat. There is a gentle rise. And this image here in the bottom part shows there are two bump outs on either side of the bridge, designed to be pleasing places from which to view the creek channel. This is the top-down view of the bridge plan, and I've shaded in light gray the approximate configuration of the current bridge outline, the current bridge structure, and the blue lines are where the creek flows. You can see that the new lighter bridge design with the two viewing bump outs in the darker blue outline for comparison of size and shape. We anticipate the Pope Chaucer Bridge replacement construction will occur in 2024. So construction is anticipated to take 9 months. That's for the Pope Chaucer Bridge. Depending on conditions, it may begin as early as April and continue until November. Trucks will enter the Pope Chaucer project about 5 houses upstream of Pope Street. Middlefield Road near Woodland Avenue is expected to experience the most significant increase in traffic due to the bridge closure. There will, of course, be an increase in traffic due to construction-related vehicles, trucks, equipment, materials, workers, etc., but that will be, of course, temporary. Channel widening work will generate the most hauling trips on any given day. And you can see these are the locations where there are likely to be traffic impacts. The green circles will indicate where there are likely traffic impacts, and the red circles indicate where there's likely to be the most traffic impact. Construction activities are noisy, and we recognize this impact. These locations near the channel widening locations and the Pope Chaucer Bridge project area will experience the most noise. Construction impacts, including noise, vibration, and dust, will be monitored and mitigated using standard best practices. There are other potential community impacts. A couple of them are the Palo Alto community eruv and bridge closure during construction. We're working with Rabbi Feldman to identify sensitive areas and are coordinating with our planning and construction contractors to ensure there is no disruption of the Palo Alto community eruv. The closure of the Pope Chaucer Bridge during construction will impact access and egress for the neighborhoods on either side of the bridge. And we'll be working closely with public safety representatives to plan for this temporary circumstance. That concludes the formal presentation, leaving most of our time for Q&A and discussion. So again, please use the Q&A function to type in your questions or comments. We will read them out loud and get to as many of them as we can in the time we have. For those who may have joined by phone, if you have a question, again, please send me an email with your question. I will respond separately.
So the first question is, could you please type the names of the JPA's team at the meeting? I caught the JPA staff named and Alex, Nicholas, and Peter Park with Valley Water, but not the rest. And Margaret, this might be a good time for Director Abrica to make his remarks as he is on.
Okay, let's do that. Director Abrica is the chair of our board, and it is my pleasure to introduce him. Just really quickly, Director Abrica was elected to the East Palo Alto City Council in 2004 and had previously served on the city's first council in the 1980s, having been deeply involved in the formation of the city of East Palo Alto. He has served as mayor several times, and in 2013, he declared a state of emergency in order to support critical levee repairs. Director Abrica is a graduate of Stanford University School of Education and works as an instructor at De Anza Community College in the Intercultural International Studies Division. He was born and raised in Mexico and came to California as a teenager. Chair Abrica, welcome.
Yes, okay, video. I wasn't sure if I was on video, but I am now. Yes, as our director, Margaret Bruce, said, I am serving as the chair of the board this year. So on behalf of the entire board and our staff, I want to thank everyone for participating tonight, and definitely extend you an invitation for subsequent meetings to get your input, to clarify any questions. And, you know, I do want to say, of the 30 years or the 40 years that I've lived in East Palo Alto, 30 of them, I have lived within a few 100 feet of the creek. And so it's always been a great interest of mine to see what we could do to not only manage the risk of flooding, but you know, preserve the habitat and provide recreational opportunities as much as possible. And I also want to say, I want to thank all the jurisdictions that have been involved in this for over the years. Our sister cities of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, San Mateo County, and Valley Water have been deeply involved. And at times it hasn't been easy, but I think together we have succeeded in the first phase of the project, and we look forward to continuing to do the work that needs to be done. So once again, thank you, and thank you, our staff, for your work.
Thank you, Chair Abrika. Appreciate your presence here this evening. And now going back to the first question we had, it was, who else is on the team? So we have Kevin Murray, Senior Project Manager for the JPA on this Reach 2 Upstream project. Tess Byler, who is also a Senior Project Manager, and she is supporting us. She is the lead for the Safer Bay project. And we have Nico Harris Parker, who is our clerk of the board and administrative manager. She keeps the wheels on the bus. And myself, my name is Margaret Bruce, executive director.
So one of the next questions, Margaret, and I think you answered at the beginning, but others might have joined later, is, will this recording be made available?
Yes, we will make this recording available, including the Q&A portion. We'll post it on our website in the coming days. We'll also keep track of the questions and summarize those in a written document that will also be posted on the website.
Okay. Can we explain what an e-roof is?
I will do my very best. I am not a scholar of Jewish law, but my understanding is that there are an interpretation of conservative Jewish law is that the city in which a practicing Jewish person lives must have a functional, a metaphoric wall all the way around it. This is not technically a built wall. It can be represented by a fence, a wire, a wall or stream, and other kinds of barriers. Within that walled situation, within that walled space, practicing Jews can are permitted to do certain things according to their faith on certain days. It's a protective structure. It is a culturally and religiously significant structure. So working with Rabbi Feldman, we've identified a couple of places where we may need to make some adjustments to where the current eruv is in order to maintain its integrity.
Thank you, Margaret. There's about 20 questions in the Q&A, and so I'm just going to kind of go in order. They all seem to have a little bit different thrust, so as we go through them, then we'll see how they're going. So this question is the project completely funded at this point? What contingencies are in place to account for overruns? Is there a possibility that the project could be halted midway while additional funding is sought?
That's a complicated question. Let me take that in pieces. The project is not completely funded at this point. We are continuing to seek grant funding. We do have significant funding. The remainder of the funding is going to be a negotiation between our member agencies and other state and federal agencies who may have additional grant funding. What contingencies are in place to account for overruns? We know overruns happen typically, not necessarily typically, but often in construction projects because unanticipated conditions may occur. Those contingencies are being built into our budgets because we know that unexpected things happen. Could the project be halted midway while additional funding is sought? I suppose that that's possible, but it would not be what the path we would recommend.
And I might, Margaret, I might just say that we cannot bid the project until we have complete funding. So I think there'd be little possibility that the project would be halted midway because we would need to have that funding in place before we bid it for construction.
Right. Projects may be halted for other reasons, but in our case, not because of lack of funding.
So do we expect this project to change the need for properties to have flood insurance? It's very similar to a question 15 that is, would the new Pope Chaucer Bridge change the flood maps and take those out, those of us that were flooded in 1998 out? And then same thing, FEMA flood insurance. So those three, I'm going to, Margaret, if you want to address those as a single question, and we'll make sure that we get all pieces to them.
Sure, I will do my best in this. Our goal is to remove properties from that FEMA floodplain. The work that we are doing in the Reach 2 project, the channel widening and the Pope Chaucer Bridge, will mitigate the risk of flooding. It will take the risk of flooding to the 70-year, 1 in 70-year flood level. That is not sufficient to take properties out of the FEMA floodplain, which is considered the 1% or once in 100-year flood. We can, we hope, achieve that if our further upstream detention work is successful. So yes, the ultimate goal is to remove properties from the FEMA floodplain. That's going to be a while in coming.
Next question is, what is the status of the lawsuit?
Ongoing. I think we are anticipating a resolution, or we are hoping for a resolution sometime in March, but I can't say more than that this time.
Will there be a temporary traffic light at Middlefield and Woodland?
I'm sorry, Margaret. You can go if you want, but I can jump in also.
Yes, please.
Okay, the intent is to have a temporary traffic light at Middlefield and Woodland for the period of time during construction of the Pope Chaucer Bridge.
Will the downstream work reduce the risk of flood at Pope Chaucer before it is replaced? So I believe this commenter means the downstream widening.
Yeah. So I'll take this one also. The downstream widening will reduce flood risk downstream of Pope Chaucer, but it will not alleviate the constriction at Pope Chaucer and prevent floodwater from coming out there in a future event.
Will you consider limiting through traffic in the Willows to residents, as was done about a year ago?
Kevin, do you have a sense of how that would work?
I don't have a direct answer for this. This was the previous limiting of traffic was not something that we did. It was a city initiative. But we can follow up with the city and see if that's recommended in conjunction with the project.
Will the trucks entering the creek enter and exit from the same ramp?
So the idea would be to have a ramp on either side of each construction site so that a truck could enter in one location and exit in another location, so there's no turnaround.
And the only exception to that is the entrance ramp for the Pope Chaucer Bridge, and trying to minimize that. We have a single ramp, and our partners at Valley Water have talked to folks about them being able to back down and then drive back up it. So it's a project minimization measure. Next question. Any possibility of pedestrian/bike access at Pope Chaucer while the bridge is under construction?
Kevin, do you want to take that?
There's not currently a plan to provide pedestrian and bicycle crossing during construction.
And I would just chime in that pedestrian and bike access through an active construction site may not be a compatible activity for safety reasons.
Is there any work planned for Middlefield Road or El Camino Real bridges under this project?
No work planned for Middlefield Road or El Camino Real. And after the project, Middlefield Road will be kind of the location of hydraulic control. So anything that gets under Middlefield Road, once we complete these improvements, will pass all the way to San Francisco Bay without risk of flooding.
Can you please review the timeline again for construction of the bridge? Will traffic be completely cut off during the entire time of construction?
Sure. We are anticipating at this time that construction for the bridge will be in the construction season of 2024. Depending on weather conditions, that could begin as early as April and continue as late as November. So in terms of will traffic be completely cut off across that bridge? Yes. We anticipate, however, that the Newell Bridge will be completed and there will be bridge access across Newell Road.
Will any bicycle, or this one I think we've already, will any bicycle or footbridge, we've already answered this one, temporarily for us to get out of the Willows and Palo Alto. So the existing pedestrian bridge will remain by that startup boot up that is along there. So there is that one, and then the El Camino. Oh, Kevin Murray is going to answer this one live. Sorry.
Oh, I was actually just that was just an administrative maneuver to move on to the next question. But I will add that yes, there is a pedestrian and bicycle bridge at Waverly Street is or very close to Waverly Street. So there is a bicycle and pedestrian crossing nearby.
Thank you. The next question is, can you better clarify the noise we hear during construction? How long will there be the most significant noise issues during construction, assuming construction starts in April?
The most significant noise would be related to the driving for the pier walls at the Pope Chaucer Bridge. I'd also like to ask if Alec or Peter or Russ can help with the duration of that. I don't think it's supposed to be very long.
Sure. This is Alec Nicholas. I'm the capital engineering manager at Valley Water, overseeing a lot of these elements, including the Pope Chaucer Bridge. I would say most of the noise would be generated from the removal of either existing structures or sack concrete banks, and from the truck traffic that would be required to off-haul that material. Now, regarding duration, because this is a creek, most of the in-channel work would need to occur between the months of April and October before the wet season or the rainy season begins. With respect to construction noises, after excluding demolition noises, I'm just trying to think of, really big items. There's no pile driving. What we have done to mitigate, impacts and vibrations for the bridge at Pope Chaucer is to utilize some proprietary methods, such as looking into spun pipe piles, which are more, as the name suggests, spun and pressed into the ground instead of being hammered into the ground, as is typically done in bridge construction projects. So we have looked into a lot of those considerations to reduce the impacts with noise and vibrations to the nearby residents and communities. With respect to other construction noises and vibrations, probably I would say placing of bank protection maybe, or equipment arriving at the job site or leaving the job site. I would say those are probably the bigger ones off the top of my head.
Thanks, Alec.
The next question is, can you define the route pathway of construction trucks to access the Pope Chaucer construction area?
Kevin, can you take that one?
I'm sorry, Tess, can you reread the question? I was typing an answer to another question.
Okay, can you define the route / pathway of construction trucks to access the Pope Chaucer construction area?
The route that would be used most commonly would be from El Camino Real down Woodland Avenue to the entry ramp near Pope Chaucer Bridge. But if Alec or Peter or Russ want to supplement that answer, please feel free.
Yeah, I think there would also be some traffic as well from Highway 101 to University, and then to the bridge site from there for some equipment and or materials.
Okay, the next question is, couldn't the bridge itself be made more natural looking to enhance the creek environment?
I suspect this question is about the existing bridge. The existing bridge will be removed in its entirety. And so we would be restoring, to the extent possible, the creek channel to its more natural function, natural condition. If this question is about the planned replacement bridge, I'm not sure I have a good answer for that question. Maybe the person asking the question could re-enter if there's detail I'm missing on this.
This one is, sorry I missed the first 10 to 15 minutes of the presentation. You likely already discussed the impacts to trees and maintaining a riparian zone. How are you factoring in community concerns about tree removal and the plan to minimize such reduction? This is a pretty big community concern.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking this question. I'm actually briefly acquainted with the person who asked this question. And we stated early in the presentation that we know that this is a big concern for many in the community. And so our March 2nd workshop, same time next week on Tuesday, is going to focus specifically on trees, the impacts of the project to trees, our plans for mitigating those impacts. So that will be the focus of next Tuesday's workshop, and we certainly hope you can join us. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
The next question is from Rabbi Feldman, and it's just a clarifying comment. For more information about the Eruv and how it interacts with the creek, people are free to contact Rabbi Feldman, and you can see the information there, his contact information. The next question is joined late, so this may have been addressed. With the new Pope Chaucer Bridge, so we have addressed it, but we'll mention this again, change the flood maps and take those of us that were flooded in 1998 in Crescent Park out of the floodplain and eliminate flood insurance.
Evan, do you want to take a stab at that one this time?
Yeah, this project by itself will not remove homes from the FEMA flood map and the obligation to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. We do intend to investigate the feasibility of upstream detention up in the upper watershed, which would supplement this flow conveyance work that we're talking about today. And we believe that if done correctly, that upstream detention, in addition to the channel improvements we're contemplating in the downstream reach, will get us very close to that 100-year flood protection. So that's the ultimate goal, but it's still a little bit of a ways off before we get there.
There's another question on truck routes. What truck routes will trucks take to bring materials to and from the work sites? Not many truck routes exist in the area.
I think we've answered, this is the same question that was read earlier.
Okay, it's in the same category. All right.
Yeah, it's by the same person too.
Ah, okay. So Liz, actually, which trees are you planning to remove on Chaucer Street and Palo Alto Avenue? This one we've just mentioned will be, have a separate meeting on this topic. And this is another FEMA one, so it is done. And then before the 9-month 2024 bridge closure, will you please close the bridge for a 1-week trial as has been suggested? How much would it cost to extend the construction over 2 years and keep the bridge open as originally proposed? And this one, I think, would be both Kevin and Alec on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so on the closing the bridge for a week before construction begins, again, while we'll do our best to mitigate the impacts of traffic during construction, a street closure is really a city endeavor. I don't think that we have the capacity to close a road, and I'm not really sure what the utility would be. So I'm sorry, that's the best answer I can give for that.
Sure, and in regards to the cost for doing a 2-season construction, I don't have a number off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but what I can say is there is definitely going to be cost impact just by looking at mobilizing or having the contractor mobilize in the first season, build part of the bridge, and then demobilize, which means taking away their materials, their equipment, et cetera, because there really isn't any near storage space for them or staging area. And then come back 1 year later, and that's a large expense. It's typically about 10% of a construction cost. That is how it's estimated. And there's obviously going to be material cost increases and labor cost increases just by 1 year alone as well. I don't have a real good number for you, I'm sorry, but those are the two things that jump out at me that yes, there would be a definite cost increase and impact by doing that way.
The question, what is the lawsuit about?
And I see the following one, what lawsuit is ongoing. We can just say that there has been a challenge to our CEQA process. That's the California Environmental Quality Act and the process and analysis that we undertook. And so that challenge is being, of course, we are contesting. We think we did a good job, and time will tell and the judge will decide. And I think that will probably be resolved sometime this spring.
This is a comment. The creek flows through many neighborhoods. For a complete flood control design, shouldn't all aspects of this project be completed? This would include retention ponds upstream. Are these upstream actually going to be built?
Good question. It would be ideal, I think, if they could be built. At this point, we don't have enough technical information about the conditions where those retention basins or detention basins are hypothetically going to be located to know if they are a feasible solution. So we hope they are, and we are working with Stanford University to evaluate their feasibility. And If they are, they will certainly improve our overall sort of holistic strategy for flood management, for flood risk mitigation. But until we do that study, until we do that evaluation, we know that in REACH 2, the work that we can do will reduce the flood risk and will give us at least a 70-year flood protection level. We hope that with the additional information, and if that is favorable, that we will reach 100%.
Next question is really related to trees. So we'll talk about that at the next meeting. Not a question, just a thank you. I know we're asking lots of questions, but having flooded in 97 and 98, this is super exciting.
We think so too. My grandmother's house actually flooded, and so I helped bail out her basement, so I feel you. And we are looking forward to working on solving this problem.
This is the same question on if the goal of this project is to reduce, eliminate. I feel like we did our downstream project was the first and necessary step, part of our comprehensive plan. We now move upstream. And so it's a stepwise process to get all of this. So it's similar, I'm just adding to the previous responses.
Yeah, and I'll add, Tess, to that there's a significant portion of the community that has long supported our ultimate goal of providing 100-year flood protection, but has consistently pointed out, and we've always understood the need for significant level of protection that we can provide in the short term. And this REACH 2 project provides a significant amount of protection. It doesn't provide 100-year protection, but it provides protection against the flood of record. And to a lot of people, that's important.
Sorry to be late. When will construction occur for the Newell Street replacement bridge? Thanks for sharing all this information and keep going with the planned improvements.
So this is based on Palo Alto's timeline, and we understand from them that their current plan is to go to construction in 2023.
Can you provide a channel capacity estimate in a scenario where the Pope Chaucer Bridge is replaced without the channelization and tree removals shown in your renderings?
Kevin, Tess, I'm going to let you take that, or maybe Alec.
I think this is a tree question.
Yeah, well, the channel capacity where the Pope Chaucer Bridge is replaced, we can't replace, we can't do the downstream widening, which does involve some tree removal without, the Pope Chaucer Bridge, we would be transferring risks. So we really need to do that. We need to do the widening. We need to do Pope Chaucer first.
Let me just jump in here and maybe clarify. I hope I understand the question regarding channelization correctly. If I understand channelization, I think it means creek widening. And if we were to not do any creek widenings, which are currently slated for downstream of Pope Chaucer Bridge, and Pope Chaucer Bridge was replaced, you now have increased capacity going underneath the new Pope Chaucer Creek Bridge. And after that, if you haven't replaced your constriction points downstream, which are the creek widening sites, you are now going to have overtopping at those locations before the water even reaches Highway 101. So it's just shifting the problem a little bit further downstream.
Better answer. So this is another comment about the footbridge and not being close to the willows. Since you said it's unclear that upstream detention will be feasible, what is your plan B?
Good question. I think maybe Kevin will chime in on this as well, but I would say that it's important for us to go through that feasibility evaluation. And in doing so, we may find some answers to what are some possible good plan B options.
Yeah, I think that the point I'd like to remake about this is that the completion of this project has independent utility. I don't think, I mean, I think there's an attempt for us to say that we can't decouple the Reach 2 project with upstream detention because we need both for 100-year protection. When in fact, the Reach 2 protection that's provided, even without upstream detention, is significant and very meaningful to a lot of people. And so if upstream detention is not feasible, we will search for a plan B. But if there's no plan B, then we'll be protecting against the flood of record with this project.
And this next comment, I think, is just referring to the previous comment about making the proposed bridge greener. And I think that the response is the proposed bridge is much greener because it actually connects it's a concrete culvert currently, and we will be removing that concrete culvert and having a natural creek bottom, which is better for the creek. And so in that sense, the proposed bridge will be already a more greener solution than the current concrete culvert. And maybe somebody else on our team may want to add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to invite, if Russ is able to join us and say a few words about the bridge structure. The bridge design is somewhat limited in that it needs to meet very specific safety standards. So there are some design treatments opportunities we have, but the structure and to some degree the design of the bridge has to meet very specific state and federal safety standards. And maybe Russ or Alec can say a lot more than that.
Is Russ on the line? Otherwise, I'll take a crack at that one.
Go for it.
Okay, so just to kind of clarify it, the various different alternatives for a bridge structure, a replacement bridge structure, were considered. And to kind of simplify into one challenge, I think that everyone will appreciate without having a picture to show. If we were to, for example, just simply span over the full width of the creek, as in one bank to the other without having any supports in between, your structure would need to be deeper or thicker to be able to handle the loads over going over the bridge. However, as you're going deeper of the structure, you're now eating into the height of the channel. So now you're going to be constricting the channel again. Well, to prevent constricting the channel, you now have to raise the new bridge. By raising the new bridge, you're now impacting the intersections on both ends of the creek because you have existing intersections, existing roadways, which you now have to ramp up a little bit more to meet this new bridge. So that is one challenge that was definitely faced with that. And now regarding barriers, for example, barriers on a bridge have to be designed for impact loading from vehicles. So there are some aesthetic considerations that can be looked into, but Caltrans typical barriers have to be somewhat utilized on vehicular bridges for the safety of all those involved. So I hope that those two examples shed a little bit more light and help answer that question.
Great, thank you. Tess, what's the next question?
It's thank you for this careful presentation and good work, a Chaucer Street family. So, and then the next comment is really, the new bridge looks stark and more like a big city bridge. I think we've just answered that question. And then same question on the trees be tagged. And I'll go ahead and answer this. The tree, since we're not going to be working in the channel till 2023, I don't want to put plastic tags on trees before. I mean, it just, you know, they're going to fall off. It'll be like all the masks everybody's seen and plastic gloves. So we will be tagging them before they're removed, and you will be able to see on maps which trees we're proposing to remove. And so that is the answer to that question. And do you have plans to secure upstream retention sites on Stanford lands? So we've answered that one. This is a new
Well,
part of the-
not exactly.
Yeah.
Kevin, you want to take?
Well, why don't you talk about, if you want to respond with regard to securing lands, and I want to respond with regards to the upstream detention, the capacity of those upstream detention facilities.
Sure. In terms of securing the sites themselves, no, we haven't. That property is not ours. That would remain to be negotiated, and whatever circumstance that was would need to be something of mutual benefit and to mutual satisfaction. And to the other part of the question, has Stanford allowed staff to access the prospective sites? Yes, they have. And we are working first with Stanford to do an exchange of information, not physically go on site yet, but take advantage of the knowledge that both parties have, especially Stanford, who's done so much work in understanding the natural landscape of their own properties. So we're doing our efficient best to get to know the information they have available to us. There are very specific protocols to follow for accessing Stanford's lands to protect the Jasper Ridge area and associated environs from things like sudden oak death and transmitting the spores that carry that bring that about. So we are working closely with Stanford, organizing those logistical details and making sure that we follow their logistical access requirements pretty closely. It's really important to them.
Yeah, and on the upstream detention sites, just the topography of the upstream water of the upper watershed does not allow for enough detention to provide the same level of flood protection that making these channel improvements provide. It's just a small kind of supplemental help. And I can't underscore enough how important the Reach 2 channel improvements are to providing flood protection. And we can do that without upstream detention, but if we're able to secure the upstream detention, it just provides that little bit extra that gets us closer to 100-year protection. But upstream detention by itself doesn't get us the flood protection we need to avoid work in the channel.
And I have a 6:05, and so I think that just one last question. Any update on Stanford plans for Jasper Ridge? They've talked about releasing their fill to the stream. And anybody have an update on Jasper Ridge? Do they mean Searsville?
You know, I think we are probably not the ones best positioned to answer questions about Stanford's plans or proposals for Searsville right now. We will certainly include Searsville considerations into our work. We communicate closely with Stanford, but I can't speak to their plans at this time, as my understanding is they are still very preliminary.
Okay, and the last one, I think, Kevin, this is the trees removed. I've seen a lot of comments. People want the trees removed and the tags. Are you talking only about Pope Chaucer Bridge, or are you talking for the widening sites? It's possible that I could do something for the Pope Chaucer Bridge, but I'm not even sure if if the other trees within the creek bed you would be able to see. So I'm going to do a separate call with you guys before our next meeting. But the final question of the day was, I would like for Kevin or Margaret to address, are flood walls part of what was described earlier as Plan B?
So I don't think there is a firmly defined Plan B. I think we are going to do the upper watershed evaluations, and we are going to be creative about what that information, what information that provides us, where we have opportunities to coordinate with other lands or other properties in the watershed or other approaches. There is no firm fixed solution. There are no firm fixed plans. There is no firm fixed plan B.
Yeah, I would say that, well, first of all, let me speak from a CEQA perspective. If we were to plan any other type of feature beyond what we've proposed here in this project and what's been approved by, in our certified final EIR, and the upstream detention sites that we're looking at are kind of under a separate effort. If anything, flood walls are the example being asked about, but if there was anything else that we wanted to do different than what we've proposed, that would require an entirely new CEQA process, which requires a public hearing on it. And in my experience, I think it's extremely unlikely that we would be able to build flood walls in the area near Pope Chaucer Bridge, just because of the experience we've had with exploring that alternative in the past. Now, that doesn't, my opinion doesn't preclude some future board of directors from making a decision. There's no way we can bind the future decisions, by the thoughts of the people working on the project now. But it's never been our plan to build flood walls around Pope Chaucer Bridge, and I don't see any way in the future that we would get that done. And frankly, I don't think anybody's really pushing us to do that.
And I think we have time for one last question before we turn people loose and get out of the way of between you and your dinner and your families.
All right, the last question is, will emergency services be warned so they have alternative routes?
Oh, yes, we will be working closely with the agency representatives from the various emergency responders. We already have close working relationships with, for example, Chief Ken Duker in the city of Palo Alto and his peer colleagues, for example, Jeff Norris on the other side of the creek in San Mateo County. We will be working with them and their colleagues so that all of the emergency response agencies are well aware of the closures and will be responsible for making sure that their own alternate routes are sufficient. But yes, we will work closely with them.
Okay, with that, I think we've answered all the questions that are in the Q&A.
Okay, and I would just like to encourage everyone, this is not a limited time offer. If anyone has questions for us, if you're curious about the natural history of the creek, if you're curious about our projects, please don't hesitate to contact us. All of our contact information is on our website. Please do feel free to visit again in the coming days and weeks. We will post this as a recording along with a summary of the questions and our answers to them on the website. If you have not already RSVP'd for next week's creek-focused workshop, please do so. Many of you have, but if you aren't sure, please send us another message and let us know that you'd like to attend. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you and good night.